What's up, everybody? How's it going? I am back and I got a very, very special guest with me today. The man himself, one half of the Maximus Dao founding crew, Dip Catcher. What's up, buddy? How's it
Hey,
going?
how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being on. And first, let me apologize to you and everybody else. It's absolutely my fault. I was late. The time got away from me a little bit. So yeah, just I'm really sorry about that.
Oh, no
Yeah,
problem. What's that saying?
yeah.
Like a wizard doesn't arrive early or late, but precisely on time?
Yeah, I guess you could say that it's expected of me based on my avatar, right? I got to be late at least one time to
Yeah,
to,
we're on
to be
slot
true to
time.
the slot. But yeah, man, dude, how's it going? I know you've been working really hard lately. You have your second big contract. I guess really set of contracts have just gone live, and you're working on a third. Tell us about it, man. What's been going on?
Yeah, so I guess a month ago today, on the 5th of September, we rolled out Maximus Team and the Perpetuals. So this was the follow-on from our
Hmm.
first stake pool Maxi, where we instead of just another max length 15-year stake, we rolled out 4 new stake pools:
Hmm.
base, which is 1 year; trio, 3 years; lucky, 7 years; and desi, 10 years. And then we also rolled out the Maximus Dao team member token called
Hmm.
Team, which earns a little bit of yield from all of them in both Hex and Hedron. And so, yeah, so we rolled this out, and um, the participation was massive. It was
Yeah.
almost twice as much as what I realistically thought it was going to be from both the team minting and
Hmm.
the pool participation. And what was really interesting about this go around on these stake pools is that there's a big demographic shift. The first maxi pool had about 5,300 unique minters that
Hmm.
minted a total of 294 million hex.
Hmm.
Whereas across these 4 pools, we had only about 3,300 individual users that had minted 810 million hex. So about
Wow.
30% less users, um, but almost 3 times as much hex. And so there's a big demographic shift from the first one to the second one.
Hmm.
Um, and the whole premise of these stake pools is to just add more value proposition to staking hex. And that's
Okay.
done by when you stake in these pools, you're earning more hex than you would by staking on your own.
Hmm.
And then also you experience about 99% gas fee savings, which can really
Hmm.
add up, especially on the longer stakes. Long, small
Yeah.
stakes experience a lot of impact from gas. And then also
Hmm.
you can sell these tokens at any time. And so,
Hmm.
um, rather than experiencing the early end stake penalty, which is like pretty drastic in the first half of the stake and then kind of tapers
Hmm.
off, but there's opportunity cost there. The You can just sell at any time. And so far, basically every single one of these tokens has only been positive relative to the hex
Yeah.
that it was minted with. So a lot of value proposition in these stake pools. And the main problem that we aim to solve with the stake pools is that when you're staking on your own, you have to pay the whole gas fee on your own. And
Hmm.
the gas fee, we saw it get really bad last year, a combination of bull market plus an Ethereum change where when they upgraded and like expanded, they increased the scalability of Ethereum by increasing the block size. And
Hmm.
as they increased the block size, they also made certain types of transactions more expensive. So the block size
Hmm.
increased by like 3 times the size,
Hmm.
and then the cost of running a particular type of transaction increased by 2.6x. So like as they increase the block size, they also make it more
Yeah.
expensive to use.
Expensive.
They
Yeah.
can get more people paying a higher fee, and
Hmm.
so the so that we already saw a pretty big impact of gas on end stakes this past year, and that was the
Hmm.
motivation to really start working on this problem. But
Hmm.
then so that and then that's the main problem we're solving with our stake pools. And then this next one that we're rolling out, Poly, is like kind of a different twist on the same concept, where rather than just pooling hex to start a new stakes, there's a bunch of these ICOSA HSI, like these HSIs that are in the ICOSA contract that are coming
Hmm.
liquidated soon. And if small holders of Hedron just go after the small stakes, the small max length stakes that they can afford in an auction, they may experience really horrible performance just on the value of that stake. And so we
Hmm.
be of great value and solve a great problem for those smaller holders to, rather than bidding on the scraps that are left over after the whales are done,
Hmm.
be able to compete for some of these larger, more valuable stakes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what Poly is it's a hedgeron pool for bidding on HSIs that are coming out from the ICOSA, this like first wave of the ICOSA HSIs.
Mm-hmm. Nice, man. I think that's a nice comprehensive view of kind of like where you started, where you're at now. Started with pulling hex, and now it looks like you're pulling hedron, trying to make a from what it looks to me reading about it. And I've been thinking about it since you've launched it, kind of in prep for today. It really seems like Poly-Maximus is appropriate because it seems like Maximus 2.0, right? Because like most of these HSIs are Quattro Cinco. So because they're the max stake length, and if I remember correctly, the redemption for Poly comes at the end of those HSIs. So it's kind of like another 15-year long pooled stake.
Yeah. So right where like, you know, the couple differences are just that it's like a basket of stakes. In general,
Yep.
like the Poly-Maximus contract, what it like if you kind of peel back all the like because this first version is specifically geared towards this like big lump of stakes that are a result of the ICOSA thing. But in general, what we're effectively building is a way to bundle baskets of HSIs into stake pools, which can kind of like protect HSI holders in general from being stuck with one having like with like only selling on like OpenSea. It can be hard to find a buyer sometimes, especially at like larger sizes. And so having like a liquid token that represents ownership in a basket of HSIs, it can bring a lot of liquidity benefits to HSIs that people experience with like our normal stake pools. And then also, a lot of these HSIs are really smaller than like for my personal friends and family, I don't recommend even staking at all unless you have over 100,000 hex. And there's
like
more
per
than
stake, like each stake needs to be 100,000 hex.
yeah. And but like when we did the analysis on the ICOSA HSIs, the median is 10,000. So half of them are less than 10,000. So that's like 10 times less than the minimum threshold that I personally recommend to people, my friends and clients and stuff. And so the the so that's like a big part of this solution is that these HSIs, they can be bundled and held as a stake pool where like that gas fees where the gas fees are spread out across thousands of users instead of one person per stake. So it's actually a really nice solution that like you can't you can't do it with native hex stakes, but with the HSIs because they're transferable in this way, you can kind of like go, bundle them up after the fact. Whereas you can't bundle, at least, we haven't figured a solution for bundling the existing native stakes yet, but you can bundle these HSIs because they're transferable. So that's kind of like the underlying thing that's being built through this. Like this is this initial rollout's like for a specific group of these, but what we're effectively building is like a bundling mechanism to convert HSIs into kind of like our normal Maximus stake pools.
Gotcha. So if I'm hearing you correctly, like the general vision for the mechanics of Poly is to find a way to offload the gas burden of the HSIs through pulling them together and distributing that burden to multiple people. And kind of like this big HSI burn day that we're seeing on November 13th and maybe a couple days after is like the first iteration of that to see, to, I guess, maybe not test the idea, but it's the first big opportunity to use it. But maybe in the future, it may not necessarily be pulling hedron together. It may be actually depositing HSIs and then for an exchange of an ERC20 that's redeemable for the underlying hex and hedron at the end of the stakes. Am I hearing that correctly?
Or even like pooling ETH and buying the OpenSea, buying on OpenSea.
Gotcha.
So like, it's just like different ways to
any mechanism of acquiring HSIs. This idea or like mechanism of pooling HSIs is kind of like within your vision.
Yeah, because and it's kind of similar to how it's like with Maxi, that was like the one and done thing. It was a big success, and then that kind of helped us figure out what the follow on thing should be, which is like now the perpetuals, and that's like an ongoing thing that'll go on forever. So it's kind of like this, where like we don't want to fight through all the challenges of figuring out a way how to do an ongoing minting, ongoing thing, because it's different. As you build up the treasuries HSIs, the value of each incoming hedgeron kind of changes, and so before we figure out all those hurdles about like, okay, how do we make it permanent? We should make sure that it works and is effective first, and And also there's some time sensitivity to it because it's in a month and a week effectively
Mm-hmm.
is that's why we're like on my channel I'm trying to do like a idea to mainnet in 30-day challenge where I'm trying to just like make progress every single day and get us over the finish line. Try to
That's
give enough
awesome,
time
man.
to mint and then do these.
I've been enjoying popping in every once in a while to those streams. It feels a little bit like an homage to like the old Richard Hart 8-hour live stream kind of days thing. So I definitely appreciate that, and I'm sure that's been fun too. Just publicly broadcasting the process of creating these contracts. But really quickly, Toby1 Hexobi, I really appreciate the 90.99 super chat. Let's much respect to both of you. Curious of your perspective on what appeal would be for large holders of Hedron to participate in Poly versus bidding against them for HSI. So before we get into like these specific kind of game theory questions, how about we just go over, we talked about it a little bit, but let's just go over the mechanics of Poly really quickly, and then we'll try to address this question.
Okay. Yeah. So the way Poly works is that there will be, hopefully the goal is to have the contract done on the 3rd of November so we can have a 10-day mint phase. So hopefully that's best case scenario. It could be shorter, it could be longer, who knows. But there will be a mint phase where you can mint 1 poly per 1 hedron deposited into the pool. And then after the mint phase ends and then these HSIs start becoming liquid, then the contract will bid on certain HSIs. So we're still figuring out the mechanism for that. The leading solution that we have now is actually where there will be one executor that actually bids on behalf of the contract, on behalf of everybody. And that's,
if I remember correctly, they don't have like access to the funds, just the bidding.
No, yeah. They can't withdraw the funds. The funds are not in their possession. It's like they volunteer. You can either consider like they're volunteering or they're just doing it on behalf of they're stepping up to do it because the reason why we chose that was because if you telegraph the strategy or hard code a strategy, then you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. So it's ideal for the strategy to be a total mystery, like for not to be much indication there. And then some of these things, it really kind of comes down to like someone's discretion. And we thought about some models where like every kind of wisdom of the crowd, but the way I view that is that like there's going to be some like really low performing people, and then a lot of like average performing people, and then like a handful of really high performing people. And if you take the average of everyone, it's like you're selecting one average performing person. And so if you're already just like effectively choosing one person in that sense, then you might as well just like hopefully pick someone who is a high performing, someone who wants to win and get it done. So so that's the solution so far. We're still kind of working through the mechanics of it, but it's like a very trust minimized, or even like you don't have to even trust the executor, because worst case scenario, you just get your hedron back. If they don't win anything, you just get it back. And then there's the risk that they could perhaps overpay, like overbid, but that's capped by just the amount of hedron in the pool. And then also it's actually very hard to even know what is overpaying, because it's like when the pool is like hex in and then hex out, it's like it's kind of like it's easy to compare that. But if it's hedron in and then hex out much later, it's like, okay, do you compare like how many t-shirts you could have got like maybe by bidding on a handful of smaller ones. And so and those things you could just underperform anyways if you're bidding on your own. So it's not like we're introducing any new risk here. And so that's the leading solution that we'll probably be building out in the next week. Cool. But yeah, so they'll bid on behalf of everyone, and then as soon as all the hedron that was pooled is just done, then then those will be the HSIs, and then what it does is it schedules when they end. So and then as soon as the last one in the basket ends, all of the hex and all the hedron will be redeemable by the poly holders in the same way Maxi is, where you burn your poly and redeem, however many hex and however many hedron. And so poly is backed by the hex and hedron in all the HSIs that are won in the auctions.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So Let me think. So yeah, so generally you put your hedron in, you're minting one for one poly. The
Hmm.
hedron is then used via the executor to bid on HSIs. And if I remember correctly, you're planning to have some kind of algorithm to display which HSIs are theoretically a theoretical good deal to bid on. So it's not just like you're bidding on kind of whatever. It's called polymaths, correct?
Yeah, so we're kind of going back and forth on like if we should even put forth any type of, because anything where it's like, okay, we're only going to do HSIs above this value,
Mhm.
then it's like,
Telegraphing a little
yeah, you're
bit.
telegraphing strategy there. And so
Mhm.
we may not actually do that. The what one, so probably that analysis is probably going to be,
Yeah.
done, I mean, honestly, probably like in public in general, like,
Mhm.
just crowd, because it is valuable to crowdsource people's perspectives on all this stuff and get a lot of different people, looking at
Mhm.
it. But when it comes down to the actual like bid execution,
Mhm.
there's probably going to be limited, like, boundaries, because it's like, okay, what, like the worst that can happen is that you either don't win and you get your hedge back, or you overpay. So it's like
Mhm.
introducing these like restraints,
Mhm.
it kind of defeats the purpose of having the executor in the first place to try to like improve performance. So,
Yeah. No, that
so
makes
that's kind of
sense.
the, yeah.
And it really seems like kind of the ideal state, at least from my perspective and my understanding of it now, is you get a whole bunch of participants in the system who are smaller players aggregating their funds together to be competitive for the larger stakers, and then as well as simultaneously distributing the risk of gas fees eating into the profits. Where
Hmm.
like so it's like a bunch of small players become a large player together, and then they reap the get access to hex stakes or T shares that they normally wouldn't not have had they not pulled their capital together. Is
Yep,
that at
exactly.
least part of it or most of
Yeah,
it?
yeah, that's the
Yeah.
whole, premise, is that, because the problem is that, um if you end up with these small ones, and it's highly dependent on, like, I made a calculator the other day, like a website. It's
Yeah.
called stakecalculator.amble, that app, and
Mhm.
that lets you, where you basically guess what you think the gas price is going to be on the stake end day and the ETH
Yeah, I
price on the
used
stake
it.
end day. And so it's highly variable what it can be. And so certain seasons, the stakes may end during a deep bear market, and so they won't
Mhm.
be as impacted. But the stakes that just happen to end during,
Mhm.
peak bull run, like who knows what crazy hysteria could be driving the price up. And even just the presence of so many of these stakes ending at the
Coming up.
same
Yeah.
at the same time, that alone can drive the prices up, regardless of
Mhm.
other stuff going on the blockchain. So,
Yeah.
um, allowing these users to, access the more valuable, because not every T-share is equal. Like the
Yeah.
larger ones are more. You want to hold T-shares that have larger hex principles more than T-shares that have small hex principles.
Mhm.
And so the that not everyone is equal, and so in order to
Mhm.
give those smaller hedge holders just access to higher quality HSIs, they
Yep.
can pool and then, compete for the larger ones, and then spread that gas fee burden that
Mhm.
really can eat into these smaller individual stakes
Yeah,
over, more
I
people.
think that brings us perfect right to Toby Wan Hexobi's question. So, what are the benefits or the appeals for, say, one of the larger Hedron players who have access to these larger stakes independently to participate? And even if you're even trying to target those participants at all.
Yeah, so those people are actually probably targeted the most aggressively, because you
Hmm.
don't want to be someone who's slightly smaller than the pool. Like, you don't want to
Mm-hmm.
be competing against it if you're in that size
Hmm.
category. And the benefit of you just joining, because now it's like, okay, you can either compete with a big whale who can afford to overpay, because if, you know the poly coins, they have, the benefits of the gas savings and then the
Hmm.
liquidity. And so,
Hmm.
and they'll, I mean, none of them are really reaching into the large bigger pays better bonus, but like, just we're going for large ones in
Yeah.
general. um it's like, you know we can perhaps afford to overpay. Like, we can afford to really ratchet the bid up more so
Hmm.
than an individual user could. So, for a larger hedron holder, it's almost like you're better off joining us than trying to beat us.
Hmm.
um, and perhaps they, what that means is that the large hedron holders just kind of, rather than going for the big ones that they might have, maybe they'll just go for a handful of smaller ones.
Hmm.
So it would probably shift either the people that just like don't want to participate because like, maybe they just for whatever reason they think they can do it on their own. They'll probably get shifted down in terms of value. Like the ones that they'll have to get more stakes of smaller size probably. Unless the bidding strategy is to get like a lot of stakes of that medium size, and then who knows what the strategy is, but so I actually see a situation that as the pool starts to build up, that we see people that are worried about competing, just like kind of being like, okay, now I have my hedron that I was going after these ones with, and now I have access to all these other ones, and it's liquid, and I'm experiencing fee saving, and so there's probably going to be some type of like at each incremental step it gets larger. Maybe that convinces one other like person who's slightly smaller to then just join in too. So
gotcha.
Could get crazy.
Yeah, it's like the large players, like a sliding scale. The large player relative to the poly pool is a sliding scale as the poly pool gets larger. Because if you're slightly under it, you're like, man, this may not be an entity I want to compete with the whatever not paradigm, that's not what we're looking for, but whatever parameters of HSIs you're looking at. So you're like, maybe that incentivizes people to join because they don't want to participate, because they can't. Anybody can join. There's nothing actually preventing them from, and that brings it higher to then include a larger subset of hedron holders to maybe be incentivized to participate. Is that kind of correct?
Yeah. Because I mean, but the fact is that there's some massive hedron holders, right?
Yeah.
And they probably have the intention of bidding, and so there's probably going to be holders that and also like what is the hedron deployer like source address or any of that do, like are they going to be active bidders? That's like or just any of the huge like the OG hex stakers who have the most that didn't just dump it all in that first like little sell off there. Like there's some massive hedron holders, and so. Sure. That those are and also and so it all kind of comes down to like who actually joins, and but also it's like are those hedron holders like because there's like the category of people that like want to use the hedron to buy the HSIs, and then there's the category of people who want to hold the hedron because of the price impact of these auctions, and so perhaps that keeps people out of the auctions that otherwise would have participated because they're like, okay, like this pool is going to drive a lot more bidding activity. And so maybe we benefit more by not competing in the auctions and instead hold the hedron. So yeah, I mean, all types of stuff could happen. And I guess we'll just have to see it unfold. That's it's half the fun of it.
For sure. Now here's a couple questions that I have more they're kind of like edge case or like really small like what if scenarios, and I'm not sure what's going to happen. I wanted to ask you. So say for example, like 10 billion hedron gets distributed, it gets minted with for Poly, and only like 8 billion of that hedron gets used to liquidate HSIs. Now I know we said previously, like if the hedron's not used, then it's redeemable for Poly. Is that 2 billion that wasn't used also redeemable for Poly, redeemable back at the end of the auctions or whatever the
yeah. So great question. So this actually this is something that I think is going to be really awesome for the whole system in general, is that leftover coins, like leftover hedron, that can be redeemed. But like if you were to redeem it, you'd be basically giving up your access to the HSIs. So like anytime something changes, it updates the redemption rate. So like every time that there's a bid, it or after the bidding is done, then there's it's updated now where you can redeem your Poly for that leftover hedron. It'll be after there'll probably be a timeline that this starts, but so if it's left over, then each coin is backed by that amount, even if it's a small amount. It almost creates some type of price floor, because if like the value of or like on the market went below that threshold, then it's worth redeeming, meaning you burn your Poly. It's like but you by burning it, you're giving up your ownership in the HSI, so it's there to be redeemed. And but a user may not want to unless they really needed that money, and in that case you're still probably better off selling it, because if you're selling, it's like you're selling access to the HSI, but like if you do redeem it to burn it, you're giving up that. And so that's how the leftover HSI or the leftover hedron will be managed. But like another approach that probably may, like a competing approach in the implementation, is to have just allow those to be bid on in the future. So if stuff's left over, it's just like that can always be bid on. But then if it never actually gets bid on, or even just like that both those things can happen at the same time, where it's there, you can redeem it, but if it gets used in the future for an HSI, then it's just kind of like punted into the future for redemption, or it's no longer redeemable. Gotcha. Then now the HSI or the HSIs aren't redeemable in that sense, but anything in the treasury is there. And then once the stakes end, there's going to be hex and hedron in there that's redeemable. So
okay, so it's like that theoretical 2 billion is just up for grabs for some period of time for anybody who holds Poly. And it's like once that 2 billion is gone, say 2 billion Poly got burned, redeemed the hedron, then that just is no longer available. It's whoever gets there first and wants to make the trade-off of I'm giving up the future entitlement to what's in the treasury via the HSIs for the hedron that I got, for the hedron that I used to mint this token.
Yeah, and so it wouldn't be like at that 1-to-1 rate. It would be like you'd burn one.
It wouldn't be 1-to-1 rate anymore
to get 0.2 hedron.
Oh, okay.
Because the other 0.8 is tied up in the HSIs, and that isn't redeemable at that time. So gotcha. It'd actually be a serious haircut, but it also is like kind of like a price. It's like a price floor in a way, where like if price ever was below there, it's like sellers could just get more money by redeeming, and then that burns supply. That makes all the HSIs divisible over a smaller group of people. And so that's the idea for the leftovers, is that like as it's left over, then you can redeem it, but it's not at the like 1-to-1 rate.
Okay, that's something I didn't know. So any hedron left over at the end, if it's not 100% that was put in, is not redeemable 1-for-1 for Poly. Okay, that's important. Yeah. And Fast Abdul, thank you for the $5, man. $5, I believe that's Canadian. Tell me your secrets, man. I'm gonna try. We'll see if I can pull them. We'll see if I can pull the secrets out of them while I still got them on today. But I appreciate the $5, man. Let me think. There was something else that I wanted to ask. Yeah, have you given any thought to potentially the HSIs in the treasury being redeemed for the underlying ICOSA?
So probably not on this one.
Yeah, I figured.
We're still kind of like using this as like for the hex stakes. And that could be a future thing. But but I feel like that strategy probably makes sense better for the smaller ones. If that's just my gut feeling. But yeah, so this one's more for accumulating the hex instead of the ICOSA, which hopefully is a pumpamental for ICOSA, because if we're getting the largest ones that could have just been rolling and increasing that ICOSA supply and sell pressure, then maybe it's better for everyone. But then again, maybe it would be, but then that invites more of the individual HSIs to be minting into that, which like kind of adds that like backlog of small stakes that kind of are stuck being that, like, if they can't end, then maybe they'll just always be rolled into ICOSA forever.
Yeah.
But yeah, the main focus on this one is for people to get the hex stakes.
Okay. Yeah, I figured as much. When I was thinking about it, I was like, that seems like an extra layer of complexity that's probably not necessary at this point in time with the very first iteration of this kind of contract.
Also because that require like it requires some discretion around when it's a good time to do it, right? Because and discretion when it's like comes down to like a market price is a little different than like the discretion required for the like with the bidding, like an executive bidding, It's like you can read that straight from like the bid straight from the contract, but if you're already introducing that, it like you kind of have to have someone who where like at their discretion is which could work, especially if they can't like withdraw the funds. But that like because it's highly based on like the price in terms of when it makes sense to do that. But yeah,
the only time I can think it would make sense.
Yeah,
go ahead. The only time I think it can make sense is like if the value of Icosa was higher than its ceiling price, then like you can immediately sell it to get more hex back than what was in the underlying stake, and like that theoretically would be beneficial for all of the holders of Poly, because now they're getting more hex, at least at the immediate point in time. But part of the value prop is the yield over the 15 years that the stake is there, and you would be losing the yield because now you just have liquid hex. So it seems a little incongruent with like the underlying purpose of it.
And also like having someone bid like is different than having someone execute orders, because with the bidding, it's not like they're able to like buy from themselves, or like maybe the executor, if they have like their own private bidding strategy, if they're like a massive hedron holder and they have some private strategy, perhaps they could like benefit themselves. But but the odds of like, if you're telegraphing purchases or sell orders, or like, the person doing it, they can just like run their own bot that basically front runs themselves, and they can just kind of like extract a lot of that value. And so in general, like, that concept of pooled or like purchasing things fully trustlessly on behalf of like the whole group, that is something I would really like to build. But and it could be used to help make that like Icosa strategy more feasible there. But yeah, that's probably the main reason, is that like it requires some like trading discretion, which is different than bidding in terms of the amount of trust required and like the worst case scenario that can happen if there's poor performance or a rogue executor.
And I think this is a great time to segue into one concern that I saw some people voice on Twitter, and I know you have a response to this, so I want to give you a minute to address it. And that is like concerns about securities laws, because you have an individual person and or persons performing work for the benefit of this pool. And so I was just wondering, what thought have you given to how this contract may or may not apply as a security, at the very least under the United States law?
Yeah. So DAOs in general, and that's kind of what, this is again like a DAO, kind of like how all these things are like DAOs. DAOs in general they're more like general partnerships where people come with their own money and they all bear their own risk. But it's more like, so it's most close to being like a general partnership where by you joining, you're actually lending the general partnership your hedron, and then it's where the loan is paid back in both hex and hedron. And so it's more like what this is most similar to is actually something that it's called a convertible note. It's something that people in like Silicon Valley startup world are very familiar with. It's a loan that converts into equity. And so it's a loan. And so that, if you're going to invest in a startup, you can effectively loan them money that is treated as a loan, but then the loan converts into equity. And so and even the pools themselves in general, they're more like they're most similar to a loan to this, to a group that you're part of. So that's and then like that group then hires a consultant to execute something, but it's but it's not like we're like raising money to go do something. It's more like you're lending your funds to this thing and then you get paid back. So that's what it's most similar to, is a convertible note, which is a loan.
Cool. So yeah, that sounds good to me. I'm not super versed in like the semantics of it all, but it sounds like at the very least you have a legal argument for what this is versus what it's not. Matt Hex actually had a good question. Can it just continuously bid on a random 80% of the top 20% current/largest stakes? So I think he's asking a little bit about automation when it comes to the bidding. Can you talk a little bit about this question?
Yeah.
If
So
you're
like kind of a random bidding strategy could work.
Mhm,
That's a good idea. Like, and, but so like as far as doing that so there are things like with Chainlink where like they have oracles that produce random numbers, and maybe that's how you might do it.
mhm,
Um, but which absolutely could work. And yeah, that's not a bad
mhm.
idea. That's
Cool.
that's one way you could do it.
Mhm.
But then if telegraph that that's what you're doing, then I guess you're not
Yeah.
fully clear on which ones you're going to do. But now it's like
Mhm,
people know that they weren't selected; it was just randomly chosen. So maybe that
mhm.
changes how people approach it. But
Yeah. And then Junior. So Poly purchases the HSIs and holds them until their maturation date. Yes, that's the idea.
yeah, and the
Um,
way that works, kind of under the hood, is that
mhm,
because it's going to hold a basket of HSIs, and we don't know the lengths of them. They're probably going to be
mhm,
the longer ones, but there could be ones peppered in there, maybe with big bonuses or something. And
mhm,
so, um, as each HSI ends, then it um, as each HSI comes into the possession of Poly, the contract,
mhm,
um, then it measures, it checks if this HSI is the oldest one,
mhm.
or has the longest expiration from current, meaning which one ends on the latest day. And
Okay.
so it's a value in the contract called latest end stake day. And so every HSI that comes in gets measured in terms of how long or how many days it has left, and then so that is like the end redemption day. And so
Mhm,
all the stakes that end in the meantime, if they end like before in the contract now, it's like before like 45 days before that, it actually just gets staked again, and then
no.
just to so that like all of them end right before the last one, and then
Mhm.
all of the hex and hedron is now redeemable. So as they
Gotcha.
come in, they um, you know can just kind of move that day back, and then once all the hedron's gone from the minting, then
Mhm,
there's no more bids can happen. So
mhm,
at some point it'll arrive on what the longest latest starting one is, and
mhm,
then um, and then everything that ends before then just gets rolled forward, just to just in holding. So perhaps the hedron will get staked and the hex will get staked until that
mhm.
end day, and then it's all liquid, and then it's all redeemable.
Gotcha. That makes sense. This good time to ask this question. What's your kind of vision for gas to end these stakes? Um,
So like in terms of who's paying and stuff.
yeah, like how would the funds be collected? Because obviously it'll probably be done through in a trustless manner where anybody can elect to pay them. And so I was just wondering, like, how do you plan to structure that?
Yeah, so I've actually started building a gas pool contract,
Mhm,
that because all the perpetual pools, for instance, they save which address is the end staker, and that was done specifically so that another contract can trustlessly know who ended a stake. And
mhm,
so, what these gas pools, which I haven't deployed because it's kind of in a rush, it'll
mhm,
become more urgent as time goes on. But the the gas
mhm,
pool contract you can fill it. People can just pitch in some ETH, some hex, some hedron, whatever they want into
mhm.
there, and then as soon as the stake ends and then the contract saves who did it,
Mhm.
then that contract allows that address to flush all those funds, so
Oh,
they can.
nice.
So
Okay.
that's probably how these will work. Is just that if you end stakes, then you can get added to this list of people that can flush, flush from
Okay.
that.
Cool. Let's see. How is Poly better than just holding Hedron in the short term?
Well, that's the $1 million question, right? Like it's really
Yeah.
asking how does hedron compare to hex?
Yeah.
Um, because um, you know that's really what you're asking there, and the and then also like how does the market price, the future value of the hex, because that's baked into Poly, because Poly's holding a basket of hex stakes, many of which, if you just look at the ICOSID HSI data, many of them are max length, like an overwhelming percentage of them are. And so, it comes down to, is the hedron price going to go up higher than the market is going to be pricing in the future earnings of the basket of HSIs there? So
who knows?
You tell us, Fog Rider iPhone, what's going to outperform.
I think it's going to be really hard. We're not going to have any kind of data on like how to even value Poly until like all of the auctions for that pool is over, right? Because at least with Maxi, I guess it was kind of same with all the perpetuals, in that we're waiting to see if there's a bigger pays better bonus. But with this pool, it'd be really interesting to see like how many T shares or how many HSIs the contract is getting before you could start to potentially value a premium or whatever it may be in this case. I guess it would be a premium relative to Hedron, not to Hex in this case, because you're paying with Hedron. So you'd be looking at the Poly Hedron chart this time instead of like the Maxi Hex chart.
Yeah, that's probably how it'll just make intuitive sense, at least early on, because it's like what the market remembers is that they parted with their Hedron and minted this thing, and now they have this basket of HSIs, and so and it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard because sometimes the Hedron price relative to if the Poly is mainly tracking the hex price times the earnings of the stakes, and then Hedron's kind of on its own. Like at some years it may look like Poly way outperformed Hedron, but other years it looks like way underperformed. And then, but maybe once all the stakes are redeemed, then is kind of where you can actually get an accurate assessment of performance relative to the two. So that's like the big speculative piece here that should hopefully bring a lot of trading to the Poly market in general, because the big value proposition of stake pooling is that liquidity aspect. So the more people that are speculating on that price ratio at the end, then the more liquid that pair is going to be. And so more value there.
Yeah, that is interesting, because with all of the perpetuals and Maxi, it's pretty easy to value it against the underlying thing that it was minted against, because its value is based on that thing. But once the minting phase of Poly is over, it really is no longer associated with Hedron as much. It's associated with the same thing that the other ones are associated with, which is just like a hex stake. So it's exactly. So that's actually interesting. I hadn't thought about that. So it's like it starts over here and then it ends up in another place to accrue its value. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, because I mean the pools, it's like hex in, hex out. But with this, it's Hedron in, hex and Hedron out, and so it's like a whole different, like a whole kind of paradigm. I mean, even like just the more I think about how we even approach the premiums in the pools, even that may be kind of improper. Like comparing it just to the 1-to-1 rate, because like really what you're comparing it to, or what I think is a better comparison of the value you're getting from the pool, is comparing the hex price, or like the pool versus hex price, compared to what you would have got had you early end staked that many days into a solo stake. So in that case, like during the first half of the stakes, especially for smaller ones, like it's like an infinite premium because you wouldn't get anything back. And so, that 1-to-1, it's like, it's very hard to even know what should your benchmark be, because like, is it the hex you started with? Is it the expected end value? Is it some like, or maybe is base the like ideal one, where that's like, okay, a 1 year, like the lowest risk of all of them is base. Is that the benchmark, like that 11 to 12% annual growth? Like, is that like a kind of like the break even point? So it's the whole, and especially, which maybe is a good thing for this one, because it's not necessarily like redeemable for the Hedron. And so it's not like a Hedron. I mean, you use Hedron, you lend your Hedron to the thing, but it's not necessarily denominated in Hedron.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, Fast Abdul, you looking at the other chains at all? The proof of work chains for this?
Well, so I'm actually using ETH Dub as a test net for this. Well, I did that because there's like no liquidation. There aren't any liquidations anywhere. There have only been 29 liquidations total.
Yeah.
And so, but luckily Alex said that he was gonna, or he could, I still need to, hopefully we get this done, but, he said that he can deploy a testnet version of Hedron specifically for us to be able to test without the 90-day cycle. So,
yeah, I guess that is hard. You're really dependent on HSIs being on the liquidation auction somewhere, like on some testnet somewhere. If not, you can't really test it as effectively. So that's good. I'm glad he's been you guys have been working together on that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to say, I don't want anyone to think that we're like, but he's given me some awesome ideas around it. Yeah, I mean, after that on Friday when you and I streamed it, he came on after that. Like, we had an awesome conversation that whole time, and then he gave me some insight from things he had thought about related to the topic of pooled bidding, and then when I'd asked him about, because someone had told me that the testnet one already was 3 days, but he said he wasn't quite sure if he couldn't remember what the sequence was for that. So he said if not, he can help just give us something on testnet that will help us.
Nice, man.
Should be awesome.
Oh, we got some spam in the chat. Let's see.
I wonder who they target like that on my chat all the time. Like, who's going to chat69.xyz?
Has to be someone. I guess someone somewhere is doing it. If I don't thought they wouldn't be doing it, right?
They know those horny Hexicans.
They're trying to target us because we got all the money.
Yeah, they're the high value targets.
Yeah, man. Was there anything else about Poly that we didn't touch on quite yet that you want to highlight or discuss? I know we've covered it a lot, especially like with how early it is. I know a lot of things are still in flux and like you're still coding it out. But please, if there's anything else.
Yeah, I mean that's basically it. We're the part for like minting and redeeming is done. That was quick because it's literally all coming straight from Maxi. So the part for minting and calculating how much is redeemable and then the redemption, that's all done. And then all of the interactions for utilizing the HSI contract. So like it's really 3 contracts. There's the Hedron contract, there's the HSI contract, and then there's the HSI manager. And so that part's done. And then what I'll probably be working on tonight on a stream is doing the actual like testing of just like like what I was describing, how it sets the new end stake date based on the oldest one or longest newest one. And then so some of that kind of like HSI management stuff. And then from there, I'll that's when we'll really hone in on just building out the executor aspect to it. And yeah, so I'm really hoping to get this done quickly.
Nice.
So we can.
So I'm pretty optimistic about getting it out for November 13th.
Yeah, it's got to make it happen. There's no big like, there's no big technical barriers. And making it like this executor model actually drastically reduces the complexity of it. Like if we were to make it like voter driven or add all these other restrictions, it could get difficult. But actually reducing the scope on that aspect of it, it both improves the performance and also can just make it easier to implement, easier for a user to understand. So kind of has a lot of benefits there. So there's not much like inventing left, I would say. And
a little bit of elbow grease, get it done.
Yeah, it's just focusing and getting it done. And
yeah, man. Well, you've been working really hard, and anybody can come watch you do it. Like, if there's no secrets here. It's a live process, right? How often do you get to see a smart contract being made live in front of you?
Yeah, I'm glad I've started doing that because one, I mean, the transparency is big, and two, it just helps me focus. That's like because it's like. Sometimes you can get started working on something and then just like you just get distracted and like, okay, I'll just do it tomorrow. But if people are watching you, then you got to just make it happen. You got to put on a show while you're doing it. So the focus part is big. And then, and also, I mean, just kind of like as a brand building exercise and like, kind of the whole premise of team is that, we even so far, people have started coming up with their own ideas for contracts that can deliver income to team. And so the more that I can showcase how you could build a a contract that
Mhm.
feeds into the system and can benefit team. It's kind of setting showing a blueprint for other, because there's like almost 4,000 people in team,
Mhm.
and someone's got to have a good idea. And this stuff, it doesn't need like these contracts aren't they're like
Yeah.
simple ones. They can be not very, like, you don't need to be like a mega expert to be able
Mhm.
to actually build or at least start working on something that's high impact. And so I'm really hoping to inspire people to start creating, especially the people in team.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, it's a lot of fun doing it too.
Hell yeah, man! I like that. Oh, actually, that have there been any thoughts on like if any of the income from this pool will be given to team stakers at all? Have you given that some thought?
Yeah. So we definitely want. So there are kind of two goals we have with this. One is that like we're still trying to like really identify the net value of joining these,
Hmm.
which could be higher than even just the hex staking one. Which is so there's actually probably even more tolerance for team earnings there, because just the value of bidding as a unit instead of on
Hmm.
your own, that's valuable, and that's separate from just the other values, the value propositions of holding these HSIs, like
Hmm.
co-ownership over these HSIs. So there's actually more value than there is, say, in the pools.
Hmm.
Um, so, um, so yeah, I think there's good monetization opportunities here with the team, both upfront and after the fact. With all the pools, it's all after the fact. But perhaps there's some type of performance based, larger that these hedron things are, then the then maybe some portion of that is
Hmm.
paid to team, maybe over years 1 and 2.
Yeah.
So something like that to really, because we have that, the whole premise of team is like a growth engine for the perpetuals, so kind of by extension the growth engine for anything. And now there's you know 4,000 people with skin in the game that can be a powerful force for driving adoption into the system.
Hmm.
We really want to unleash that and make it so that, because the larger these pools are, the larger this pool is, the more that each user benefits.
Yep.
So it's like everyone, both team people and the people who are joining this system,
Hmm.
want it to be as massive as possible. And so, um, we're definitely making it so that team is properly incentivized to try to grow these pools
Yeah.
and increase that value for everybody that participates.
And that's one of the things I liked about Team too, not just like the value that we knew we were getting from minting it via the rewards from all the perpetuals, but also it's kind of like it's a bet on anybody in the community who wants to ever add value to it. Like there's no barrier to adding income to the team rewards, but at the same time, it's also kind of like a bet on like you and Goldkey, because that seems like when I first understood it, it seemed like the fundamental endpoint for value for anything you guys create. It's kind of like a core group of people who just believe in all of this stuff and then will has a stake in everything you build in the future. And like one of the things from betting in crypto is betting on developers, betting on teams, and so betting on teams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even, I mean, there are people out like other than us that like, there's one person in particular that has an idea for something that I'm like helping him. I'm not working on it, but I'm helping him kind of get started.
Hmm.
And it may be an even better idea than anything that we've come up with. Like, it's actually an
Wow.
awesome, thing. He asked me not to share it until, he's closer to it being
Of
done,
course.
but, and that pays into team,
Hmm.
and, it's something that provides this other roundabout benefit to really any large staker. So it's something that benefits both team and the perpetuals. So
Wow.
it's like huge innovation,
Hmm.
that's quite simple. Um, and so, even people other than us that are, have skin in the game and team,
Yeah.
um, want to contribute to it, because it's almost like that team mechanism. Now it's like, say you're a smart contract developer, and the hardest part is getting users.
Hmm.
Like, you can be the smartest developer there is, and the hardest part is getting users. And if your contract, so if you have an interest in team, it's like, okay, you can increase, because say that the team earnings increase by 1%, and then that causes, like, okay, any like 1% increase, like how much extra demand for team does that cause increase? And then it's like if you double the buy side of a liquidity pool, you don't just double the price, you like square the price. It's kind of
Yeah.
that like amplification effect.
Mm-hmm.
And so increasing the earnings, you can grow the earnings by 1%, but perhaps that increases the team price by say 10% or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so people that have that skin in the game, and then also have a group of other people that maybe aren't building stuff, but are, can get on board, promote on board. Just kind of, trying to create a good ecosystem for people building around the like team and Maximus ecosystems that can, just so it's not, it's like, and with me, it's like, I try to set the tone, and I try to, be a good example of, just pushing and building and solving problems and stuff. But there's other people that, that are thinking these same things and trying to build and explore different opportunities.
Hell yeah, man. I like it. Junior, thank you for the $5, man. I appreciate it. Is your last question correct if I'm missing something? Well, first, I'm sorry I didn't get to your question before, but I have it up here. I believe this is the correct one. If not, put your other question in the chat. He says, doesn't that remove the ability for HSIs to basically compound by eliminating their ability to be recycled through the ICOSA buyback?
Yeah, so these for this release, we're not doing the ICOSA buyback. We're trying to accumulate the largest ones possible. So if you're an ICOSA holder, that's probably good, right? Because it's less sell pressure on that. But yeah, so these ones, we're going for these high value T shares instead of the like ICOSA recycling thing.
Perfect. I hope that answered your question, Junior. Let me think. Okay. So we're coming up on an hour, so we'll probably start wrapping it up soon. I don't want to take too much of your time, especially because I was late. But kind of as a closing thoughts for anybody who's considering joining the Poly pool, what are some questions you think they should ask themselves, or things that they should think about before committing economically?
Yeah. So definitely, like if you want to like be bidding in the HSI auctions, so that's like the main thing. Like that's if you're planning on doing this, Poly is for you. If you're not already a massive whale in Hedron, then Poly is good for you. The risks are the main risk is going to be just the executor risk, but that isn't necessarily any different than the risk you'd be bearing bidding on your own. Because like you on your own, because the risk with the executor, it's like they either underbid and they don't win anything, but that's which you could also do, and the end result is the same whether you do it or if you're in the pool where you get your hedge back. There's a risk of overpaying, meaning like, okay, you're getting in a bidding war and then end up paying way more than what you could have, maybe get less T shares per hedron than you could have by spreading them out across other ones. So there's that risk, but you could have also done that on your own anyways.
Yep.
And so there's not too much additional risk from that. There's of course, the smart contract risk in general. We'll be getting this one audited just as, similar to everything else. So, we'll try to mitigate that risk there. But yeah, I mean, it really comes down to, the big question that you to decide if you're going to join is what's going to outperform hex, or, the max length, effectively max length hex stakes or hedron. And that's a big question. So that's like the main one. And probably the best way to do that is to look at maybe glance at a chart, but really just look in your heart, and you make that decision. Like, don't listen to someone else for that answer. Like, you make that decision. And so that's it's a tough, it's a big speculative question, but that's the bigger the unknowns are, the higher volatility, and that's good for opportunities and introduces liquidity. So it's
absolutely.
like
And there was one other thing I wanted to mention with you about this, and these aren't, I wouldn't frame them as risks, but trade-offs, right? So because theoretically the hedron you're putting into the Poly pool, like you said, were going to be used for the liquidation auction. So if we make the assumption that they would be converted to HSIs, with Poly you have all of the benefits that are like distributing gas fee burden, liquidity of an ERC20, as well as potentially getting access to T shares that you wouldn't have just participating on your own. But the trade-off you're making there is that you're not holding the HSI yourself. So like the two main things are selling the HSI for Icosa, like you just don't have that option. And then the second big one is taking it in advance for the Hedron for the HSI. Like you just don't have access to those two features, but you're trading those off for the features that I talked about previously. I don't think there's a risk. I think that's just a trade-off.
Yeah, that's a better frame. They're just trade-offs, and then I guess you brought up the good point about like the HSIs are just held. They're not not minting Icosa, and they're not taking advances, and so, but it's kind of not not necessarily necessary because you can always sell.
Yep.
And so if you want to risk your HSI by taking the advance and then having to pay it back, it's like, okay, you could just sell that, or perhaps sometimes soon there may be some type of lending solution or some type of way to take an advance on your pool tokens.
Yep.
Something like that might exist.
I imagine especially as Pulse Chain gets more popular and more people are developing on it, we're going to have a lot of collateralization options for a lot of these different derivative and for these like derivative products, which I think is going to be a really, really important tool for all of us to have.
Yeah, imagine being able to go long with collateral that grows every day. Like
right?
Usually your collateral is like static, but if you have a collateral that earns its own yield, like that's an awesome collateral from both the borrower and the lender's perspective.
Yep. I mean, technically, we already have that a little bit with Hedron, but one thing I'm excited for is like what's the NFTs, collateralization for those, and then even these tokens like the perpetuals, Maxi. Hey, real quick before we get to Hex Love's question, Sam, thank you so much, man. You're awesome too. I hope you're enjoying your dinner, brother. Let me think. Where is it? Okay. Hedron growing 24x faster than Hex in terms of holders. Is anyone concerned the main asset isn't popular right now? I'll answer it first really quickly. I'm not concerned. Most of Hedron's growth is just like the Hex community, understanding it, learning about it, and wanting to participate. So the growth is kind of capped at like wherever the Hexagon population, well, whatever that is. And so because we're in a greater bear market overall, money and attention isn't flowing into crypto as much. Hex isn't growing. But from a pure numbers perspective, Hedron is growing more than Hex. So that does translate more into like price generally.
So when he says the 24x faster, like, does that mean like on a per wallet basis, or like?
Yeah, I think it's per wallet basis.
That means, so what's like Hedron's like growth rate right now?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't know. I know Sam's been tracking those numbers pretty closely himself. That's where he's getting it from.
Yeah.
But like, I think the metric is number of new holders. So it's just new wallets that have the token. It's a little bit of a fuzzy metric because like one person can own many wallets, or like, especially because we have Icosa staking, people can be distributing their Hedron to multiple wallets to stake. But I'm sure there's some truth to like the different.
Yeah, Hedron's definitely, part of it's like the momentum. It's like Hedron's had a solid performance over the last like 3 months, and so that's drawing people in, and also just in general where Hex is in its cycle, because there's so many people that bought 25 cent and above Hex, like basically a whole year almost of buyers, and so that category of user wants to lever up the risk so that they can remake that 10x. They want something that has a high chance of 10x versus Hex, and so there's a lot of demand to lever up. I mean, that's why we saw, I was shocked by the amount of team participation. Like, especially like right out the gate, like huge participation there. So it's like, because team, that was the riskiest asset that was released in our launch last month by far. So a lot of demand for levering up the risk, like, all these different coins going on where people are like hopping from thing to thing. The people, with the ETH stuff, like that seemed like the older cohort of hexagons they're much more risk averse, but this like newer crop, they are very risk on, and so that contributes to the growth. And also like Hedron, Hedron airdropped to 100,000, however many people had stakes, but it's starting from a smaller number, and so like a comparing head-to-head percentage growth of those two, it's you know, although Hedron absolutely is growing, you know, on a like a percentage basis, like per month, faster than Hex.
Mhm.
You know, that's you know kind of due to the nature of the cycle. It'll probably oscillate. Like certain times we'll have Hex growing faster,
Yeah.
certain times we'll have Hedron growing faster, and that's just kind of how those two will be in tandem
I
together.
imagine.
But yeah, I mean, you know, Hedron does have a lot of upside, especially like as it becomes a lot more scarce.
Yep.
Because you know the main thing that's kind of the burden on the Hedron price is really just the the long term, the people that bought their hex in between mid December and
Mhm.
mid February, and then staked because they're you know hundreds or thousands of times cheaper hex, and they're locked in their stakes at like you know at 11,000 hex per T share instead of right now there's 24,000 hex per T share, so 2.4 times lower share rate.
Mhm.
Um, those people that you just get so much every day, you know, like it's so that's you know times the 10x bonus.
Mhm.
So that's probably the main source of just like overhead on the in the Hedron system. But I mean, new stakes now it's like you know the amount they're getting is fairly small, and so that's like a really positive thing for the price. So I see it, you know, probably cycling like we'll like it probably experience like a lot of like big moves up, big moves down,
Mhm.
because like as it goes up and as time goes on, those OG stakes, you know, all those people that sold down to make that first like, you know, big Hedron bear market, that was like 900 days of hex stakes. So
Yeah.
then, okay, 900 days from now, now it's like, okay, that same amount of Hedron is now there.
Mhm.
And, you know, that one was all like backloaded because there was like 800 days of no selling. And so this one will probably be a little bit more spread out, but
Yeah,
just
because
over a same
there'll be a
period.
bunch of those stakes that have ended between now and that like 900-day period because not all of the stakes were 15-year stakes. It's mostly the long ones that will be a burden. And then
Yeah.
also some people have been minting along the way anyway, so the concentration, like you said, won't be as high because
Yeah.
people are minting throughout that entire 900 days
Mhm.
instead of like you just get it all at once.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, you know, I really I like the what I love about Hedron is that it's um it reminds me of how Dogecoin and Litecoin they do something called merge mining,
Okay.
where if you're mining Litecoin, you're also mining Dogecoin,
Yeah.
and so it's kind of similar to like if you're staking Hex, you're also like you're earning Hex, you're also earning Hedron.
Yeah.
So I think that's like an awesome distribution
Mhm.
mechanism. You know, that has some you know some like kind of long term scarcity baked into it.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, it's and so you know, and also you know, Hedron is a big part of because you know we're building a lot of like these hex stake focused things, and the Hedron is just a big part of that. You know,
Mhm.
with Maxi, it's like the you know we got the 5x Hedron bonus. You know, team gets you know like their big portion of their yearly income uh, is Hedron.
Mhm.
So the and also you know like uh, I kind of wish I mean it's too because there was no even talk of the Hedron staking before, but you know Maxi holds the Hedron until end, so it's like Maxi's like a massive holder of bonus
Yeah.
Hedron of it's one of the largest stakes since Hedron launched.
Yeah. And not
That
selling it because it can't sell.
yeah, and it's holding it for
Yeah.
yeah, and it's earning a lot. Like
Yeah.
every so often, like I'll just go and mint it just for fun, just to
Mhm.
like see how much it's gonna earn, and it's like a shockingly huge amount,
Yeah.
and so and it's just holding it, so it's not diluting the staker yield, and
Mhm.
it's not putting negative price pressure on.
If anything, you're
So
just preventing AMR from happening, man. What are you doing?
yeah, yeah, you know, it's
No,
but
yeah.
yeah, it's I really like the you know I like what Hedron's about. I like
Mhm.
the you know, and I like that it's you know that's the reason why we integrated it in you know into our system because it's kind of it's like a natural it's like part of Hex.
Yeah.
It's another feature in Hex.
The thing that I like to say, it's like I know there's the meme of like Hex pays you every day, but like it doesn't pay you. It credits you every day, but it pays you at the very end. So the thing I like to say is Hex doesn't pay you every day, but Hedron does because you can
Hmm.
make it every single day.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
Um, well, man, let's see if there's any questions here. If not, I don't want to take up any more too much more of your time. Let's see. Oh, we talked about this a little bit. I know there's some flexibility with any hedron not being used, maybe for future auctions down the line.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we thought about that, but the main bulk of them are happening
Like,
around this event, and also just for simplicity, because like the whole like redemption sequence is based upon the fact that at some point it stops,
Mhm.
because then that's what schedules the hex redemption.
Mhm.
So with this particular, like with our like simple solution that we can build and launch in a month,
Yeah.
um, that like ongoing stuff around, minting and then using that to bid on more.
Mhm.
That's just kind of outside the scope of what we're going to build now. So we're trying to reduce features and reduce complexity.
That makes sense.
And while that is an awesome idea and it could be effective,
Mhm.
for this one, it's just going to be, one-time pooling. That's the budget, and then all the hedron earnings are distributed at the end.
Makes sense. When you got a timeline like 30 days, minimum viable product is the name of the game, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Well, all right, Dip Catcher, dude. I had a great time this last hour. Again, I really apologize to you and everybody in the audience for being a little bit late there. Appreciate your guys' grace with that. Anything else you want to talk about? If not, you go ahead and tell us where we can find you. I'll start dropping some links in the chat for all of your socials.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, the best place to find me is on Twitter.
Mhm.
Twitter name is Tonto Nomini. Also follow Maximus_Dao. Follow Goldkey, GOLDK3Y_. T.me/Maximus Dao is our Telegram. Do not get scammed in Telegram. A lot of people, they go in, they ask questions, then immediately a scammer with a fake version of me, a fake profile, is DMing them, asking them like, "Oh, put your private key in here." So do not do that. I won't DM you. Only if you're asking for help, only accept help in public. Do not accept help in DMs, all in public. And yeah, so and YouTube, follow me on YouTube. Search Dipcatcher on YouTube, and that's it. Thanks for having me.
Of course, man. Speaking of, just real quick on like Telegram scams and everything, literally today I got a message from somebody impersonating somebody I chat with privately a lot, just saying like, "Hey, are you free?" And like just like not thinking about it, I'm like, "We got to stream soon, but like, what's up? What do you need?" And then I looked, and like the color of their icon was different than normal. I'm like, "Dang, dude, they got me a little bit there, too." It was sneaky. I was like, "Oh shit!" But like, yeah, you gotta be careful out there. It's like just a moment of judgment lapse, and like, you can get scammed. But
yeah, it's like, especially during the launch, like someone I get messages all the time. They're like, "Hey, was that you DMing me?" And I was like, "No."
I don't know who you are.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like fake, where it's like Tonto Nominel or
yeah.
something.
Exactly, like two eyes, or like a one instead of an I, or a zero instead of an O, or something like that, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. I had a ton of fun, learned a lot. I hope everybody in the audience got some value out of it. If you haven't already, please hit the like button for the video, hit the subscribe, follow me on Twitter, etc., etc. Me, Silver, the Antidote, and Access, we do offer a private Discord group where we go over on-chain TA and fundamentals of Hex, Hedron, Icosa, as well as macro stuff. And I do offer consults if that's something you're interested in. Just shoot me a DM if you're interested in any of that, and we'll get you straightened out. All right, Dip Catcher, man, thank you so much. I hope you have a good rest of your day. It looks like it's a little lighter out there than where I'm at, so you probably still got a couple hours left of your day to go enjoy. But yeah, thanks so much. Great conversation. I look forward to talking to you more and participating in more of you and Goldkey's work, man.
Perfect. Thanks, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Talk soon. All right.